Final Fantasy VII is the game that shaped me into who I would become later in life. Playing it at an early age left such a profound impact on me that it continues to inspire me to this day when it comes to writing the characters and worlds of my own stories, or that eventual pipe dream of making my own video game. When I was 12 years old, my friend introduced me to Final Fantasy through Kingdom Hearts, and while I love the Kingdom Hearts games as well, my interests gravitated much more towards Final Fantasy. It seemed so much more mysterious and exciting to me in a way. And with the series having 12 mainline entries at the time, all with their own standalone stories, it ignited some weird instinct in my mind that told me I had to play and experience every single one of them. My journey had its humble beginnings with Final Fantasy X, since new copies of it were still being sold at retail, but the game I really wanted to play was Final Fantasy VII. It was the game most prominently featured in Kingdom Hearts, and my friend also showed me Advent Children, a movie that made absolutely no sense to me, but the world, characters, and the music had this spellbinding effect on me. Who are these characters? Why are they so cool? What is that ruined city? What happened in the game that led up to the events of this movie? I just had to know. I only watched it once or twice with my friend, but I watched that climactic fight with Sephiroth on YouTube almost daily. Before Final Fantasy, I pretty much only played games that were based on movies, but that changed when I finally got my hands on Final Fantasy VII later that same year. Popping that first disc into my PS2 was magical, even though I couldn't know it at the time. Keep in mind that this was the year 2007 and the character models looked very outdated, so of course I cracked a few jokes about how the characters were nothing but blocks that made them look like off-brand Lego figurines. But I'd been told that the game looked bad graphically several times before, so that didn't put me off at all. What I remember most about those early days of playing was the joy of discovering new characters. I was already acquainted with Cloud and Aerith via Kingdom Hearts, and I remembered Tifa from Advent Children, but most of the other main characters had such a small role in that movie that I ended up forgetting about them altogether. So playing the opening section of the game and encountering Barret was really exciting. He's a character that I don't know. A big and burly Mr. T looking dude with a gun attached to his arm. So many things about Final Fantasy VII have stuck with me throughout all these years. From the characters, the endlessly interesting and mysterious world, the memorable quotes like, "Let's mosey," and "There ain't no getting off of this train," and of course the endless censoring that had to be done to Barret and Cid. But one thing that rose above it all was the music. I got so amped up for every battle thanks to the battle theme, and the hype only grew with the boss music and the Genova boss music. I would be humming the tune to Cosmo Canyon and Rufus's welcoming ceremony throughout the whole day. Despite only using the PS1 sound chip while later games utilized the capabilities of the CD format, this was the game that made me realize just what video game music was capable of. I replayed it very recently and, of course, I still love it, but what I find very funny every time I play it is just how difficult I found certain parts of the game to beat when I was 12, parts that I breezed through today without even thinking. Most of my time during the latter half of 2007 would be spent playing Final Fantasy VII, and like with most RPGs I played at the time, there were certain bosses that took me forever to beat. I had no idea I was supposed to attack Reno's pyramids until my friend pointed it out to me. Then the 100 Gunner and the Heli Gunner in the Shinra building made me look like an absolute bitch. 2 bosses back to back without saving, and then Rufus, a third. Genova Birth's HP number intimidated the hell out of me, and it's probably why it took me so long to get through it. But the most embarrassing one is Gin Attack. I died and died and died fighting this thing, only to find out years later that I could have just used an X potion to one-shot the friggin' thing. Demon's Gate and Hojo were the only other ones that probably gave me over 5 game overs each. The frustration was real, but the satisfaction of finally beating them and getting to continue this unknown journey outweighed any negative feelings I might have had. Final Fantasy VII is a game that couldn't be made today, and I'm not saying this in a games nowadays kind of way. It was very much a product of its time and a perfect blend of limitations and talent. There are so many articles where the developers talk about how they managed it with the limitations they had, like the backgrounds inside towns and dungeons being 2D images that gave the illusion of 3D with how the characters are positioned. But the FMV cutscenes still managed to be large enough that it had to be crammed onto 3 entire CDs. The key word here is limitations. There's a reason that retro-inspired modern games rarely ever feel like the games they're trying to emulate, and it's all in the limitations, or the lack thereof. There were many limitations that needed to be worked around if a game was to be played on an NES cart or a 700 megabyte PS1 CD. This is probably just an old man yells at Cloud moment though. I hope I've inspired someone out there to try Final Fantasy VII. The impact this game left behind on both myself and the video game world is staggering, and there's just so much to do in it. Secret bosses, chocobo breeding and racing, hidden summons, enemy skills, limit break grinding, the battle square, the list just keeps going on. This game is really important to me.